For 5 weeks, Michael and Emily were trapped in the same nightmare. Their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, was simply gone. No witnesses, no clues, and a crushing absence of hope. Police scoured the woods and every nearby road. They found nothing. Lily was gone as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole. The police were losing hope. But on the 7th day, the impossible occurred. At precisely 7:14 p.m., a frantic scratching echoed from their living room window. As Michael hurried to the sound, he froze. A police K9, a German shepherd they knew as Ranger, stood just outside. His paws planted against the glass, his eyes locked on Michael with unnerving focus. He didn't bark, he didn't stir, he just stared as if pleading to tell them something. The dog returned the next day, and the next, every day at 7:14 p.m., tapping, scratching a low whine. No one understood his reason, but when the truth was finally revealed, Michael and Emily would go pale, wishing with all their hearts they had listened. Stay with us, because this story's revelation will leave you stunned. Before we go any further, please show your support and subscribe. And I truly want to know, where are you watching this story from? Let us know your country in the comments. It's amazing to see our global family. The night their daughter disappeared began like any other. A quiet Thursday, one of those nights where drama feels a world away. That was the peace Michael and Emily felt watching Lily bring a drawing to life on the living room floor. Outside, the sun was soft and golden, sinking behind the tall maple trees, its warm light gracing Lily's tiny hands as she carefully filled in the wings of her butterfly drawing. She hummed as she colored her little legs, kicking with that carefree joy unique to a 5-year-old. Michael remembered the feeling of perfect peace. No premonition, no out-of-place sounds, not a single sign that in less than an hour their world would utterly collapse. Lily then asked to play outside for just 5 minutes. Emily hesitated for a moment before agreeing. She could watch from the kitchen window. Lily quickly slipped on her tiny shoes, grabbed her beloved stuffed bunny, and bolted outside with a happy giggle. 5 minutes turned to 10, then 15. When Emily glanced out again, a cold dread washed over her. The yard was empty. At first, she told herself Lily was just by the swings or behind a bush. She stepped outside, calling her name softly, expecting to see her daughter peek out with a smile, giggling like she always did when they played hide-and-seek. But there was only silence. No laugh, no footsteps, no sign of life. Lily, she called again, her voice cracking with the first hint of panic. Michael rushed to help, desperately checking the fence, the garden, the shed. Each second stretched into an eternity, heavy and suffocating. Her stuffed bunny was lying near the back gate, face down in the grass. She never left it behind, ever. That's when raw panic set in. Michael dialed 911 with trembling hands. Meanwhile, Emily ran frantically from house to house, begging neighbors for help. Within moments, the street was filled with police cruisers. Officers deployed with flashlights, pounding on doors and calling Lily's name into the deepening darkness. And then the K9 unit pulled up. Ranger, a powerful German shepherd trained to find the most vulnerable. He was given the scent from Lily's bunny, then lurched forward with purpose, pulling his handler toward the woods behind their house. Michael and Emily followed, their hearts pounding with every step, praying. Every rustle of leaves made Emily jump. Every snapped twig sounded an alarm. Suddenly, Ranger barked sharply, then followed the trail deeper into the woods, and then suddenly, he stopped. He whined, circled, and the scent vanished into thin air. Just like that, the trail went cold. And so did the last piece of hope Michael and Emily had left. That night, their world grew colder, the silence deafening, terrifyingly empty. Their daughter, their little girl who loved butterflies and bedtime stories, was gone, and nobody knew where she could be. Morning arrived with a cold, heavy silence, the kind that seeps deep into your very bones. Michael and Emily hadn't slept. Every time Emily dared to close her eyes, she saw Lily's stuffed bunny lying forgotten in the grass. Each time Michael blinked, he saw the exact moment Ranger lost the scent. The world outside felt alien, as if the night had devoured something precious and refused to give it back. By dawn, their street had become a command center. Police cars lined the road on both sides. Yellow incident markers peppered the yard. Radios crackled with terse instructions. Volunteers began gathering, some already carrying flashlights, others with printed maps and bottled water. Ranger was at the center of it all. Tail, stiff ears held high, pacing with a restless urgency. His handler, a seasoned officer named Davis, repeatedly tried to redirect his focus, but Ranger wasn't behaving like a trained canine. He was agitated, unfocused. He kept straining against his leash, pulling towards the woods, barking at unseen shadows, his nose pressed to the ground, convinced the answer was there, hidden just beyond what humans could perceive. Search teams began to comb the neighborhood. Some descended into the muddy creek bed. Others fought through thick brush, calling Lily's name until their voices cracked. Drones buzzed overhead, methodically scanning the forest canopy. Helicopters circled their spotlights, cutting through the morning fog. The hours painfully passed. There was not a single trace. No footprint, no piece of clothing, no sign of a struggle. Just an aching void. Every so often, an officer would approach Michael and Emily with an update, each one a heavier blow than the last. "We're expanding the search grid. No signs yet, but we're covering all ground. We're bringing in additional units." Emily just clung to Michael's arm, tears streaming down her face. "She's just 5, she whispered, repeating it like a prayer, as if reminding the universe of its terrible mistake. "She's only 5. Meanwhile, Ranger kept returning to that one spot in the woods, circling, whining, and digging at the ground, as if desperate to reveal something hidden from human eyes. Officer Davis watched, completely baffled. "He's never done this before," he muttered to Michael. "He's acting like she's right here or just was." But every time, every single attempt, the trail evaporated into nothing, as if someone had simply erased it. By late afternoon, the search team regrouped, exhausted and deeply frustrated. Emily's legs trembled, and she sank onto the porch steps, staring blankly into the oppressive woods. Michael knelt beside her, holding her hands tight. The day had been so long and brutal. Despite an army of searchers, they were no closer to finding their little girl than they were the night before. The silence was a cruel weight, but Ranger, he wasn't done searching. Not even close. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. Every corner echoed with memories of Lily. Her crayons lay scattered on the coffee table. Her tiny socks were still folded on the armchair. Her favorite storybook lay open on the rug, as if she might rush back any second to finish the page. But she never came. She was gone, and the silence was a crushing weight. Emily moved through the hall like a ghost, her fingertips trailing against the wall, a desperate search for balance. She stopped at Lily's door ajar, just as Lily always left it. With a trembling hand, Emily pushed it open, and the emptiness of the room struck her like a physical blow. The small pink blanket, a half-finished puzzle scattered on the floor, her little shoes placed in a perfect row, just as she always insisted. Everything still everything waiting for her return. And Emily's heart fractured all over again. She reached for the small stuffed bear on the bed, the one Lily clutched tight every single night, pulling it to her chest. The fur held the faint, sweet scent of Lily's strawberry shampoo. Emily's strength gave out, her knees buckling as she collapsed to the floor, a broken sob echoing in the silent room. Downstairs, Michael was frozen on the couch, his eyes locked on the front door, willing the handle to turn. He replayed her last words over and over. "Just 5 minutes, Daddy, please." He hadn't told her no. He hadn't gone out with her. That one regret was a blade twisting deeper than any other. And every so often, the police radio in the living room would crackle to life. Search team returning negative findings, drone unit covering a new grid, more volunteers arriving. Each transmission was just another door slamming shut on hope. Officer Davis came by that afternoon. Ranger trotted at his side, the German shepherd's coat matted with dust, his paws caked in mud from endless hours of searching. Davis's voice was gentle, "We're throwing everything we have at this. We're not giving up." Michael could only nod the words, a distant echo he couldn't grasp. But Ranger sat before Emily, his gaze fixed on her with a strange, unsettling focus. His ears forward, his nose twitching, his tail held rigid. He wasn't settled, not like a weary search dog ought to be. Emily finally lifted her tear-streaked face to meet his gaze. For a brief instant, the dog let out a low whine. It was deep, almost a sound of mourning, and it sent a tremor through Emily's soul. That night, the house felt colder than ever. Emily left Lily's door wide open, unable to bear closing it. A tiny nightlight cast a soft glow, illuminating the empty bed. Michael stayed awake long past midnight, his stare lost in the darkness of the woods outside. "What if we never see her again?" he whispered, his voice cracking with the unbearable weight of it. Emily squeezed his hand. "We will," she insisted, though the words tasted like a lie on her own tongue. But just outside, concealed by the shadows, Ranger's silhouette materialized for a fleeting moment, watching their home, waiting. Something was shifting, something none of them could possibly comprehend. It happened exactly 7 days after Lily vanished. The evening air was still holding an unnatural heavy silence, as if the world itself held its breath for their grief. Michael sat on the sofa, his eyes vacant, fixed on a silent television, while Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, her own gaze hollowed out by a week of unspeakable sorrow. Then, a sharp, sudden rap against the living room window shattered the stillness. Emily shot upright. Michael whipped his head around, blinking away the fog of his grief. Tap. Tap. Scratch. This wasn't a random sound. It was deliberate. It was urgent. Michael rose slowly, drawn to the window. As he pulled back the curtain, he recoiled in disbelief. It was the German Shepherd, Ranger. The police canine was standing on his hind legs, his front paws pressed against the glass, his eyes wide, burning with a strange and ferocious intensity. His breath misted the glass as he stared directly into Michael's soul, his tail rigid, every muscle coiled and tense. He made no sound. This wasn't just restlessness. It wasn't the behavior of an ordinary dog. He was trying to communicate. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Why is he here?" she breathed. Ranger belonged with Officer Davis Miles, and miles away at the station. Another piercing scrape echoed through the room, his claws scoring the glass. This wasn't random, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Michael cautiously unlatched the window, cracking it open just a bit. "Ranger, what are you doing out here, boy?" he murmured. The instant the window was open, Ranger forced his muzzle through the gap, a desperate whine escaping his throat. His ears were flat against his head, his frantic eyes darting from Michael to the blackness of the woods, pleading with him to look. Just then, strobing red and blue lights washed over the yard. Officer Davis ran up out of breath. "I am so sorry." He broke free from the unit again, made a beeline right for here. He tried to clip the leash to Ranger's harness, but the dog fought him. A low growl rumbled, not at Davis, but at something behind the house. Michael stepped out, his heart pounding hard. Clear his throat. "Why would he keep coming here?" he asked softly. Davis just shook his head. "I honestly don't know. He's been acting strange since the search." Ranger barked sharply, pulling on the leash, straining toward the woods. His body was taut with frantic desperation. This was not normal. It wasn't instinct. It was as if he was begging them. Emily moved closer, her voice shaking. "Do you think he smells her?" Officer Davis paused, weighing his words. "I don't know." But Ranger barked again, a loud, aggressive sound, his paws slamming onto the porch. He wasn't mistaken. He wasn't confused. He was trying to tell them something they were not prepared to face. The following night, at the precise same time, 7:14 p.m., the sound returned. Tap, tap, scratch. Emily and Michael went rigid. Their eyes met, sharing a silent fear. He moved slowly, almost unwillingly. Michael crossed to the window and drew back the curtain. Clear's throat. Ranger stood there again in the very same spot as the night before. His paws pressed hard against the glass breath, fogging the pain, eyes burning with urgency. Emily whispered softly, "So... Oh my God, he's back!" Michael slid the window open a crack, and Ranger instantly pushed his snout through the opening, whining louder now, tail held stiff and still. This was not a friendly visit. This was not a game. His actions were sharp, intentional, desperate. Before they could react, headlights swept across the lawn. Officer Davis came up the drive, winded and frustrated. "I swear this dog has never once behaved like this," he said. He took off the second I turned around. "But why our house?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with the question. Davis sighed heavily. "I'm not sure anymore. He's not following procedure." At that moment, Ranger barked sharply, straining against the leash as Davis struggled to hold him. His claws scraped against the concrete as he pulled toward the woods behind the house. The very spot where the trail went cold a week ago. A knot formed in Michael's gut. "He keeps looking back there, like he needs to show us something." Davis hesitated. "I'll take him through the woods tomorrow. Maybe he's catching a new scent." But Ranger growled not at them but toward the forest. It was a sound that seemed to be both a warning and a desperate plea. That night Emily hardly slept. She just kept hearing that tapping over and over. He saw Ranger's eyes piercing the darkness, a silent plea from beyond the glass. Michael lay sleepless, staring into nothing, a strange feeling stirring deep inside him. On the third night, the chilling ritual repeated itself. At 7:14 p.m., the sound returned. Tap, tap, scratch. Ranger stood there, his paws caked in mud this time, his panting ragged and his eyes filled with a wild desperation. As Michael unlatched the window, the dog pressed a small, grimy object against the pane. It was a tattered shred of pink fabric. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. "That looks..." "I know it," Michael whispered, his blood running cold. They called the police at once. The officers came, inspected the cloth, and just shook their heads. "This isn't enough to go on. These woods are full of old scraps." But Ranger erupted in a furious bark that made them all flinch. His entire body quaked with an unspoken urgency, a plea the officers simply wrote off as the animal's stress. But Michael and Emily knew better. Something was unfolding, something dark and pressing, and Ranger was their only guide. By the fourth day, Ranger's appearances were expected, but his desperation was escalating horribly. The first time, he had merely tapped the glass. The second and third, he scratched and whined, but on the fourth night, he came at a dead run. Michael and Emily heard him long before they saw him. The thunder of heavy paws on the porch, his frantic barks shattering the night's stillness. When Michael raced to the window, Ranger was already there, reared up on his hind legs, beating his paws against the glass with a desperate, frantic rhythm. Emily clutched her heart. "Something is terribly wrong. He's acting like the house is burning down." Michael flung the door open, and Ranger shot past him, a blur of fur and purpose-deaf to any and all commands, paying no mind to Officer Davis's shouts from the driveway. The dog's paws skidded on the hardwood as he made a beeline for Lily's bedroom. Emily gasped, running after him. Ranger plunged his nose into the empty room, sniffing the air wildly before letting out a long, mournful whine, a heart-shattering sound. He looked back at Emily, his eyes pleading. This wasn't random, it wasn't confusion. It was a message. Officer Davis finally arrived out of breath. I have no idea what has gotten into him. He actually broke right out of his kennel tonight." Ranger gave him no notice, turning and trotting back towards the front door, bumping it again and again with his head. He then bolted outside, circled the house and reappeared at the window, his paws caked in fresh mud, his fur on end pressing another object to the glass. It was small, a torn shoelace pink frayed and unmistakably tiny. Emily's breath hitched. That's from Lily's sneaker." Davis took it, examining it closely. "We can't be sure. A lot of brands look just like this." Ranger let out a low growl, a sharp, uncharacteristic sound that froze them all. He wasn't growling at the piece of lace. He was growling at their doubt. Michael knelt before him. "Ranger, where did you get this?" His voice broke with emotion. In an instant, Ranger spun and bolted for the back fence, his barks now sharp commands urging them to follow him. His meaning was unmistakable. He needed them to come with him right now. But when Officer Davis moved to follow, Ranger moved to block the officer, placing himself before Michael, nudging him, insisting that he and only he must be the one to follow. "Why me?" Michael whispered the question hanging in the air. Ranger pawed at the earth, his whines turning to pure, soul-deep desperation, then darted a few steps toward the tree line, looking back expectantly. Emily's hands trembled. "He's leading you, Michael. He knows something." But the woods were a wall of darkness, impenetrable and dangerous. The official trail was cold. The police had found absolutely nothing, and still Ranger barked again, furious and defiant. He was frantic on the verge of breaking, but he refused to surrender. Something was out there, a scent on the wind only he could perceive. Emily fought to hold it together for Michael, for the authorities, for her own sanity. But her deepest resolve was for Lily. But with every passing minute, every night when the clock chimed 7:14 p.m., every time Ranger came back, pounding on their window like a phantom from a nightmare, a piece of her soul fractured. On the fifth night, she could no longer contain her grief. She sat on the edge of Lily's bed, desperately clutching a small pink sweater, the one Lily had insisted on wearing even in the summer heat. Emily pressed it to her heart, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of bubblegum shampoo, still clinging to the worn fabric. Her voice shattered into broken whispers. "My baby, where are you? Mama's right here. Please just come home." Michael stood frozen in the doorway, watching her shake, utterly powerless to soothe her agony. He ached to speak, to comfort her, to hold her. But words were hollow now. Everything was hollow. And then the sound returned. A tap, a scratch. Emily's head shot up, the color draining from her face. No, not again," she breathed. But Ranger was there, a silhouette against the darkness, his paws clawing the glass with a terrible urgency. His eyes blazed with an undeniable fire, a raw desperation. Emily stumbled down the stairs, tears carving paths down her cheeks, her voice trembling. "Why does he keep coming back here? What could he possibly want from us?" Michael cracked the window open just an inch. This time Ranger didn't force his nose through. He barked directly at Emily. Not at Michael, not toward the woods, but at her. He barked again, a high, frantic sound that pierced the night, then pressed both paws hard against the glass as if commanding her to come near. Emily crumpled to her knees, sobbing. "I don't know what you're trying to tell me. I don't know how to help you." Ranger's entire body seemed to react. He suddenly released a long, shattered whine. It was a sound that wasn't like a dog at all. It was raw, wounded, and desperate. His ears flattened, his tail dropped, his body quivering with a profound emotion. Then he gently pressed his forehead to the window, a soft, slow, mournful gesture. Emily mirrored him, pressing her own palm to the cold glass, tears falling onto her wrist. "It's all my fault," she whispered through her sobs. "If I'd just gone outside with her, if I had only watched her, she wouldn't be gone. She just wouldn't be." Ranger's single, sharp bark cut through her self-blame like a blade, as if to say, "Stop. You're wrong. I know something." He spun around, raced to the porch, sprinted for the woods, then stopped abruptly halfway, looking back directly at her. Not at Michael, at her. Emily wiped away her tears, her heart hammering in her chest. Ranger barked again, a short, commanding sound. He wasn't asking anymore. He was pleading with her. Emily rose to her feet, staring into the oppressive dark of the woods. Maybe, just maybe, this dog wasn't crying for help. Maybe he was trying to tell her that Lily was still alive. The sixth night changed everything. Ranger didn't just tap the window. He didn't bring an object. He didn't bark for attention. He brought a message at 7:14 p.m., right on schedule. Michael squeezed his eyes shut at the familiar sound. Emily stood paralyzed by the kitchen counter, terrified to even look. But tonight Ranger's tap wasn't gentle. He slammed his paws against the glass with such force that a picture frame on the wall shook. His frantic breath fogged the pain as he dragged his muddy paws down in long, desperate streaks. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Emily crept closer, fear and confusion tightening inside her. What is he doing? Ranger paused, his gaze fixed on theirs. Then he repeated it. The same lines, the same shape. Michael squinted. It looked like just mud, just random smears. But as Ranger repeated the motion, dragging his paw across the glass with stunning, deliberate precision, Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Michael, look." He leaned closer, and the color washed from his face. Those weren't random streaks. They formed two slanted lines on the left, a space, then one long downward streak on the right. 2, 1, 21, Emily breathed. "That's a number." Ranger barked sharply once, as if confirming her words. Michael's voice shook. "But what does 21 mean?" Ranger scratched again. Left side 2 times, right side 1 time, repeating the pattern with unnerving determination. He wasn't drawing, he was directing. Emily blinked away tears, her gaze sharpening. "What if it's not a number, a place, a direction?" Ranger darted from the porch, racing around the side of the house, then returned to the window, pressing his muddy paw against the glass at the very same angle. Emily gasped. "Michael!" "What if he's marking a direction like a turn, a path?" Michael swallowed hard, a cold dread crawling up his spine. 2 turns left, 1 right. They both looked toward the woods. Ranger barked again, a loud, urgent cry, then bolted toward the tree line, veering left 2 times, then right once before stopping and staring back at them. Michael's breath hitched. "He's showing us the route." Officer Davis arrived just in time to see Ranger's final, deliberate turn. "What in the world is he doing now?" Davis muttered. Emily pointed to the marks. "He's trying to lead us somewhere." Davis's gaze shifted from the dog to the window, and then to the woods. Ranger performed the exact sequence one more time, this time barking with each distinct movement, forcing them to understand. A shiver traced its way down Emily's spine. "What if this is where the real trail begins?" Ranger growled softly, a sound of affirmation. Michael grabbed his flashlight. Emily reached for her coat. Ranger turned his message clear, asterisk ready asterisk. The numbers weren't just numbers. The marks weren't random. They were a map, a path, a clue hidden in plain sight. And Ranger was done waiting. At night, the forest was a solid wall of blackness, silent, vast, and unforgiving. No wind, no moonlight, just shadows frozen in place. Michael hesitated at the tree line. "Emily, maybe we should wait for the police." But before she could answer, Ranger shot forward into the dark, stopping just far enough to remain visible. He turned sharply and barked 2 times, the sound piercing the still air. His tail was rigid, his posture urgent. Emily's voice shook. "Michael, he's been trying to show us this for days. If this leads to her..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Michael took a steadying breath, raising his flashlight. "We follow him." Ranger wasted no time moving fast, too fast for a normal stroll, but slow enough for them to keep pace. Every few moments he would stop, look back, and bark as if urging them onward. 2 turns left, 1 turn right, exactly like the muddy markings. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Twigs snapped under their feet, and branches clawed at their shoulders as Ranger led them down a narrow, overgrown path none of the search teams had seen. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why didn't anyone ever search this area?" Michael's throat tightened. "Because this is off the grid," he answered. "Outside the mapped search perimeter." Ranger suddenly stopped, his nose to the ground. He breathed in the scent of the damp earth, a low, soft whine escaping his throat. Then he moved again with a new urgency, pulling them deeper until the woods opened into a hidden clearing. Emily stopped cold, her breath catching. The clearing was unnervingly silent, forgotten save for a set of faint footprints in the mud. Tiny ones, Her knees gave way. "Michael, they're Lily's footprints. It's her!" He held her as she trembled, but Ranger never stopped for a moment. He barked once, sharp and clear, and sprinted toward the far side where thick vines veiled something wooden. "What is that?" Michael whispered. They moved closer, the flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Ranger pawed at the earth, barking with a desperate fury, clawing at the thick vines. Beneath them lay a structure the mouth of a large drainage tunnel, old and rusted. It was almost completely swallowed by tangled roots and leaves. "This wasn't on any map," Michael breathed. "Nobody mentioned it." Emily added, her mind racing. Ranger clawed harder, desperate, as if trying to tear his way inside. He growled, not with aggression, but with a pleading urgency for them to hurry. Michael leaned in. A faint, rhythmic noise echoed from deep within. Tap, tap, tap. Emily froze. "Michael, do you hear that?" The color drained from his face. "Yes, tap, tap, tap." Ranger backed up, whining loudly, nudging them insistently toward the entrance. Michael whispered, his voice shaking, "Someone's in there." And Ranger's eyes told them the rest of the story. Asterisk. "We have to go now. Asterisk." The entrance to the drainage tunnel gaped open like the maw of some ancient creature. Rusted metal, slick concrete walls, and a stale air that hissed from its depths. Emily instinctively grabbed Michael's arm. Ranger, however, did not hesitate. He stood at the tunnel's mouth, paws planted firmly, his body rigid and alert. His ears were forward, his eyes locked on the darkness waiting inside. And then the sound returned. Tap, tap, tap. Soft, weak, and faint, but it was unmistakably human. Emily's breath caught. "That isn't an animal, Michael. That's not—" "I know," he whispered back, his own pulse hammering. Ranger barked sharply, stepping back, as if to push them toward the opening. But then something completely unexpected happened. He stopped dead-whined and utterly refused to go inside. Michael frowned. Why won't he enter?" Ranger looked up at him, his eyes speaking a language far deeper than words, of fear, urgency, and a solemn warning. His body quivered, not from exhaustion, but from something else. Something deep inside that tunnel that even a trained canine refused to confront. Emily's voice trembled. "If he's scared, what could be in there?" The tapping sound echoed once more, but slower this time. Tap, tap. Then a single tap followed by a faint, broken whimper. Emily gasped. "Michael, Lily whimpers just like that when she's afraid. That's her. That has to be her." Michael crept closer to the entrance, casting the flashlight's beam into the tunnel. It stretched down a long, dark corridor, showing only dripping water and slick concrete. Ranger barked again, but this time it wasn't a command. It was a plea. He paced around Michael's feet anxiously, brushing against his legs, trying to pull him back from the precipice. "He doesn't want us to go in," Emily whispered. "He's telling us no. He's warning us not to go in alone." Michael said, his voice grave. Emily, her hands trembling, fumbled for her phone and dialed the police. Moments later, squad cars arrived, their officers emerging with tactical flashlights and gear. Officer Davis knelt beside Ranger, his brow furrowed in deep concern. "I've been his partner for years. I've never seen him act this way. It's like he's alerting us and warning us off all at once." Another officer stepped forward, dismissive. "Probably just some raccoons down there." But Ranger answered with a low, sharp growl, a menacing sound that stopped the officer dead in his tracks. Michael's voice cut through the tension, firm and certain. "That wasn't an animal. Someone is tapping from inside that tunnel. And if Ranger's reacting like this, it's serious." Davis gave a grim nod. "We'll check it out." Two officers advanced cautiously into the darkness, their flashlight beams cutting across the damp walls. All the while, Ranger whined restlessly, pacing in agitated circles. Then, a voice echoed from deep inside the tunnel. "We've got something back here." At the sound, Ranger erupted in a volley of violent barks. Emily felt her knees buckle. Michael's heart hammered in his chest. The terrible truth was beginning to surface, and none of them were ready for what lay waiting. That night, a violent storm consumed the sky. Jagged bolts of lightning tore through the darkness, illuminating the skeletal trees in stark, momentary flashes. The wind howled like a wounded animal against the house, rattling the windows as branches scraped like bony fingers against the glass. Inside, Michael and Emily sat on the couch in silence, their eyes fixed on the raging storm, as if the chaos outside mirrored the turmoil within. The police had left hours ago, promising to resume their search of the tunnel at daybreak. But a deep and terrible unease had settled over them. A sense of dread pulsed in Emily's chest like a frantic drumbeat. Then, at precisely 7:14 p.m., a sound shattered the storm's roar. Bang, another bang, then a desperate scratch. Michael leapt to his feet. "No way! Not in this storm!" Emily's eyes widened in terror as she raced to the window, yanking back the curtain. There in the torrential downpour stood Ranger, soaked to the bone, caked in mud, his chest heaving with exhaustion, his eyes wild with a desperate urgency. He slammed his paws against the glass once more, his barks piercing the thunder with a force that shook the living room. "What is he doing out here all alone?" Emily cried out, her voice breaking. But before she could even reach for the latch, a pair of headlights cut through the rain-swept yard. Officer Davis came stumbling toward their door, his jacket drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. "He escaped again," Davis shouted over the gale. "Broke right out of his kennel, cleared the station fence. Made a beeline straight for your house." Ranger let out a sharp bark at Davis, then turned and barked directly at Michael, before spinning toward the dark woods. He ran a few paces, then stopped, looking back at them. His message was terrifyingly clear. "Follow me. Now!" Another flash of lightning bleached the world white, and in that stark, frozen moment, Michael saw something that chilled him to the core. Ranger wasn't just barking. He was trembling, shaking uncontrollably. It wasn't from fear, Michael realized. It was from pure, desperate urgency, tears streaming down her face. Emily grabbed her coat. "He's trying to tell us," she choked out. "Something is happening right now." Without waiting, Ranger bolted for the woods, slipping in the mud, but refusing to stop. He kept looking back, his eyes wide and pleading for them to follow. Michael's jaw set as he turned to Davis. "Call your team. Tell them we're going back to that tunnel, tonight." For a moment, Davis hesitated. In this storm, it's too dangerous." Ranger lunged forward and barked directly in his face, a loud, sharp, furious sound. It wasn't a bark, it was a scream. Emily stepped past Michael, her fear eclipsed by a fierce determination. "My daughter is out there," she said, her voice unshakable. "And that dog knows something. I can't wait for morning." Another bark tore from Ranger's throat as he charged into the tempest. Michael seized a flashlight. Emily was right behind him. Davis swore, yelling into his radio as he bolted after them. The storm consumed their figures as they plunged into the woods. Ranger led the way, a relentless force, and in every blinding flash of lightning, Michael and Emily saw the same terrifying truth. Whatever was happening in that tunnel, it was happening now, and time was their enemy. The storm roared like a primal beast, ripping limbs from trees and turning the earth into a thick, grasping mud. But Ranger never faltered. Not for the gale, not for the thunder, not for the suffocating darkness. He surged through the forest with a desperate purpose, glancing back every few moments, ensuring Emily and Michael were still with him. A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating his drenched coat and the unwavering fire in his gaze. At last, the dog dug his paws in, skidding to a halt at the edge of the clearing, the very spot where they'd discovered Lily's tiny footprints. But tonight, something was terribly wrong. The curtain of vines hiding the drainage tunnel entrance had been violently disturbed. Some were severed, others freshly ripped, dangling like frayed cords. The storm couldn't have done this alone. Someone was here. Emily's hand clenched Michael's arm. "Oh my God, please just let her be alive," Ranger bolted to the edge of the clearing, barking furiously at an unnatural pile of soaked leaves near a twisted tree. He tore at them with his paws, a wild desperation, until he struck something solid. A dull thud. Michael's heart hammered as he rushed forward. Ranger dug faster, flinging mud and roots until a wooden surface appeared beneath the wreckage. It was a wooden plank, soaked by the deluge and edged with rusted metal hinges. A hidden door. "Help me!" Michael yelled. Working as one, they frantically cleared the remaining debris. Emily gasped as the final layer was torn away. It wasn't just a board. It was a trapdoor, ancient heavy, perfectly camouflaged with the forest floor. No wonder the search parties missed it. No drone could have ever seen it. It was an invisible part of the landscape. Ranger hurled himself at the door, scratching with a maddening intensity. His claws gouged deep grooves in the wood, sending splinters flying. Officer Davis stumbled into the clearing, gasping for air. "What is that?" "A hidden entrance," Michael said, his voice strained. Ranger found it. Without another word, Davis dropped to his knees, gripping a rusted metal ring on the plank. It wouldn't budge. Ranger let out a deep, furious bark that ripped through the trees, a sound of pure demand, an insistence, a plea for them to hurry. Michael grabbed the ring next to Davis. Emily threw her weight in, jamming her shoulder under the edge for leverage. Together they heaved. The hinges shrieked like a dying animal. Rust flaked away. Wood splintered. The door rose inch by agonizing inch until a blast of cold, rancid air erupted from the blackness below. Emily gagged. "What is that smell?" Davis aimed his flashlight into the void, revealing a narrow ladder descending into a concrete chamber. A hidden room buried deep beneath the woods. Ranger whined loudly, his claws tearing at the dirt, desperately sniffing the foul air, his tail a blur of fear and hope. Emily's voice trembled. "Michael, someone's been living down here." Lightning fractured the sky again, but this time the thunder could not conceal the sound that was rising from the darkness. A fragile, trembling cry broke the silence. Small, faint, human. Ranger's bark was an explosion of desperation. "She's down there!" Without a second's hesitation, Davis moved. He was the first to descend the rusted ladder, the beam of his flashlight cutting a trembling path. Michael was right behind him, his heart hammering a painful rhythm against his ribs. Emily remained frozen at the top, paralyzed by fear, until a soft growl came from Ranger, who nudged her leg with a trembling insistence. It was a silent plea he needed her to go. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat and followed them into the abyss. The air in the subterranean chamber was a frigid shock, their every breath crystallizing before them. Concrete walls, a floor of packed earth, weathered crates stacked along one wall, a lone mattress on the ground, and a single bare bulb that flickered hanging from a wire, casting long, dancing shadows that crept like phantoms. And then Michael's flashlight beam swept across a tiny shape huddled in the corner. It was a small, curled figure, shaking uncontrollably. Halfway down the ladder, Emily stopped dead, her voice shattering as she breathed a single word. "Lily." The small form stirred, letting out a faint, terrified whimper. Michael crossed the room in a desperate, stumbling rush. "Lily, baby, it's Daddy." The child flinched from the sound, pressing herself into the wall, a body braced for pain. But as the light illuminated her face, Emily's strength gave out, and she sank to her knees. It was Lily, so fragile, her face pale, her hair matted, her cheeks hollowed. Her tiny wrists were raw from a struggle. She was shrouded in a filthy blanket, clutching it to her chest, as if it were her only shield. Her voice, a broken whisper, called out, "Daddy?" In that moment, Michael's soul fractured. He swept her into his arms, holding her with a fierce tenderness, so tight as if terrified she might vanish all over again. Lily's frail arms found their way around his neck, trembling as she clung to his warmth, his safety. Emily scrambled to their side, and tears carving paths down her face as she gathered Lily into her own embrace. "Mommy's here, baby. Mommy's here. I'm here." Lily's quiet sobs were muffled against her mother's shoulder. But then a detail from her daughter made Emily's blood turn to ice. Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "The man! He said he'd come back tonight." Davis went rigid. "What man, Lily? What man?" With a weak, trembling finger, Lily pointed back towards the ladder. "He lives up there, in the woods." The color drained from Emily's face. Michael's arms tightened protectively around his daughter. Davis was already on his radio, his voice a harsh command for immediate backup. But Lily wasn't finished. Her eyes wide with terror, she whispered one more thing. "But I wasn't alone." Michael went still. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily's small lip quivered with unshed tears. She raised a tiny shaking hand and pointed toward the stack of crates. A deep warning growl rumbled in Ranger's chest, the fur along his spine standing on end. Davis swung his flashlight in the direction Lily indicated, and the beam fell upon a sight that stole the very breath from their lungs. Another blanket, another small shape, another child. This nightmare wasn't over. It wasn't even close. For a heart-stopping moment, no one moved as the storm raged on above. But in that hidden chamber, time itself seemed frozen in terror. Davis swallowed hard, taking a deliberate step toward the shape behind the crates. Ranger's growl was low and constant, his instinct screaming danger, his tail rigid. Slowly, Davis lifted the corner of the blanket. A second child, just as dirty, just as frightened, flinched from the light, their eyes wide with sheer terror. It was a little boy, maybe 7 years old. A sharp gasp escaped Emily's lips. Michael's breath hitched. Lily clung to her mother, whispering, "He cried a lot. I told him we'd be okay. I told him Ranger would find us." The words twisted Michael's heart into a painful knot. Her faith in the dog held strong even from beneath the earth. Davis swiftly wrapped the shivering child in his jacket. "We need medics now." His voice crackled over the radio, sharp with an urgency that demanded immediate backup. But a chilling thought clawed at Michael's mind. "Lily said someone was coming back tonight." He locked eyes with Davis, his own narrowing with suspicion. "Someone who lives close, very close." Davis gave a grim nod. "And someone who knows these woods like the back of their hand." A sharp bark from Ranger shattered the moment, pulling every gaze. He bolted to the ladder, a low growl rumbling in his chest aimed at the opening above. His ears pinned back, for bristling teeth bared in a silent promise. Someone was up there. Heavy footsteps thudded on the storm-soaked earth above them. Emily's blood ran cold. "Oh God, he came back!" Davis shoved her and the children behind Michael. "Stay down. Don't move." He scaled the ladder flashlight beam, cutting a path upwards, his weapon ready. The beam sliced through the downpour, landing squarely on a figure looming at the edge of the trap door. A tall man drenched by the storm, his eyes blazing with a wild fury. The color drained from Michael's face. "Wait, that's our neighbor." Davis's grip on his weapon tightened. "Sir, don't you move." But the neighbor held his ground. Instead, a slow, twisted smirk curled his lips. "You should have just stayed out of it," he hissed. With a violent surge of fury, Ranger launched himself upward, his barks so ferocious the very forest seemed to tremble. The sheer force of it sent the man staggering back, slipping on the sodden leaves. In that moment, Davis scrambled out of the hole. He locked the man in place with his aim. Seconds later, backup arrived, sirens slicing through the storm as officers flooded the clearing. The neighbor made a break for it, trying to escape, to vanish back into the woods he knew so intimately. But Ranger closed the distance before he'd taken 2 steps, tackling him and pinning him to the earth with a protective rage no one had ever witnessed in him before. The click of handcuffs echoed in the night. Davis let out a long, heavy breath. "We got him." Emily clutched Lily, tears of pure relief finally streaming down her face. But Lily whispered, her small voice full of certainty, "I told you, Mommy. Ranger always knew." And for the first time in 14 agonizing days, Emily truly believed her. The dog had been right all along. By morning, the storm had finally broken. The forest, once a place of terror and shadows, now glistened as soft sunlight filtered through the canopy. Raindrops dripped like jewels from the leaves, and birds began to reclaim their songs, as if the world itself was breathing again after a long nightmare. Paramedics carefully moved Lily and the other child into the waiting ambulances. Emily refused to let go of her daughter's hand, not even for a second. She sat beside her, tenderly brushing the mud from her hair, whispering quiet prayers of thanks through tears that would not end. Michael stood just outside, watching his family, his body trembling with relief. The last 2 weeks had etched years onto his face, but now that crushing weight was finally beginning to lift from his shoulders. Davis approached him quietly. "She's stable, weak, dehydrated, but the doc says she's a fighter." Michael could only nod, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "She always has been." Ranger trotted over then, utterly exhausted and soaked to the bone, his fur caked with mud and leaves, but his eyes, those fierce, knowing eyes, were finally soft and gentle. The frantic urgency, the panic that had driven him relentlessly, had at last given way to peace. Emily stepped out of the ambulance and knelt beside Ranger. Tears streamed down her face as she cupped his weary head in her hands. "You saved her. You saved my baby girl," she whispered. Ranger leaned into her touch, his weary eyes shutting. A soft sigh escaped him, like a breath held since Lily first vanished. Michael knelt beside them, his own voice cracking with overwhelming emotion. "Thank you, buddy. You never gave up on her. Not when we all had." Ranger's tail gave a single weak wag, pressing his weary head into Michael's chest. A hero spent but triumphant, as the late afternoon sun began to dip and cast a golden glow across the parking lot. The doctors emerged with the words they'd all prayed to hear. Both children were safe. Emily wept again, but this time with tears of absolute joy. Ranger gave a single soft, proud bark, as if to declare to the world his duty was done. As darkness fell, the family huddled together beneath the stark hospital lights, holding Lily tight, while an officer gently guided Ranger to a patrol car. Just before getting in, he stopped. He turned his head one last time to the little girl he fought so fiercely to save. Lily raised her small hand, whispering, "Ranger, you're my angel." His tail thumped softly. Michael faced the cameras as a crowd of reporters had now gathered around them, capturing this powerful moment. He spoke words that would soon circle the globe. "If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen. If someone is in trouble, you act. And never ever underestimate a dog's loyal heart. Because tonight, a child was brought home safe and a terrible truth was uncovered. And a dog, against all odds, became a hero the world will never ever forget."